All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name's Hat,
And I'm Eric.
and today we have so much news to talk about. This was a great and a terrible week. So, if y'all haven't heard, most of the Final Fantasy 15 DLC has been canceled. Tabata, the director of Final Fantasy 15, has left the company. Square-Enix posted $33 million in losses. And the rabbit hole keeps going on and on, further than I even fully expected. That live stream last week was way more than we predicted. We were way off with that, so none of us suspected this. But in addition to that, we had a recent announcement with the PS1 Classic. I guess the emulator that's on the PS1 Classic that's going to be, emulating these PS1 games is simply the PSX emulator that's available for everyone to download for free. That's been kind of a gray area of legality. Apparently, Sony just put that in the box, and you're just going to be basically emulating games with a resource that's already freely available. So there's been some criticism regarding that as well. So we're going to get into that. But before we get into all that, Eric, what have you been playing this week that you want to talk about?
Well, last week I said I'd buy World of Final Fantasy for the Switch, and that is exactly what I did.
Man of your word.
Man of my word. I've definitely put a lot more time into it than the last time I tried it. I put about roughly 16 hours into it. Yeah. And it's pretty good. It's not like the most wow amazing thing, but it's a very serviceable fan service game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wouldn't recommend this game to anyone who's not a fan of Final Fantasy or not familiar with the series. This is definitely more of a celebration of those type of for the games of the past, because they make so many references and there's so many characters from those series, and because of that, they depend more on their nostalgia and their reference than actually making these characters compelling, besides the main one that you have. So you really have to bank on your nostalgia to really enjoy at least the story aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the gameplay is very simple. You have a stack mechanic with monsters that you can capture in the game, and you can put them in different formations and have like different elements and certain strengths and weaknesses, and you can swap it around all you want while you're out in the field.
What was that? Sorry. I was going to say, did you play the PS4 version or the PC version before getting this version?
I did try the PS4 version.
Okay. Does this seem like a better version for you?
The main difference so far has been that it's portable. And I think it's definitely a better portable experience than the console experience, at least for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think I should have maybe have gotten the Vita version. Maybe I would have
liked it a little bit more.
It feels like a very nice pick up and put down type of game. It's like I said before, it's not like the most amazing game ever, but the two main characters, like Lon and Rain, I think their names are. They're just like a brother and sister who have forgotten who they were before, and they're going on this adventure to collect mirages and remember who they are, and plot starts developing on the way. I think my one criticism definitely of the story is, as I mentioned before, the supporting characters, you really need to know where they come from to enjoy like the scenes with them. And really not much story progresses. Like, you're going from area to area and you're meeting these characters, kind of like the showcase type of thing. And occasionally you get a lot of story content dumped onto you. So it's kind of like just like go through reference A, reference B, reference C, then story dump, then reference D, reference E.
Yeah. This game, I still haven't played it. I said I was going to buy this one. I said I was going to buy the other one. I just had other stuff to play, but it's always kind of seemed to me almost in the same vein as when the original Kingdom Hearts came out. Like, it was kind of like it seemed like kind of like a game like that where like, hey, you get to go interact with all these different worlds and all these different characters, and that's kind of fun from that perspective. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at with it just being kind of a fun game to play. Obviously, Kingdom Hearts has expanded upon that, so that might be not the best example, but that's kind of the vibe I was getting
Yeah,
from
there's
that game.
not a lot of original characters in World of Final Fantasy, so unlike Kingdom Hearts, it's kind of hard to hold it up on that end. I haven't gotten to the point of the story where things just start getting very serious, but occasionally I've been getting story stuff brought upon to me. But like I said, the reference stuff is cool. Like when I went to Nibelheim, it looked like Midgar.
Yeah.
Like it just looked like just the way the town was set up. The voice acting is pretty okay. I'm not going a little mixed on this, but the voice acting is pretty okay. It's very self-aware sometimes that it's like a video game or like kind of like meme type culture type of deal. So the game doesn't take itself too seriously. It's a very lighthearted game. So that in turn just I think it makes it okay that it's aimed towards a younger audience, especially how easy the combat is.
Sure.
So it's a good game, but you have to be a Final Fantasy fan I think, to really enjoy it.
Yeah, these types of collaboration games, a lot of times they do kind of have that feel where it's geared towards a younger audience, but it's kind of perplexing because it also feels like in order to enjoy it, just like you said, you have to be a fan of all the other games, which were games that came out, over a series of decades. So I guess maybe that's part of the appeal they're hoping it's going to have, is maybe it can bring in some new fans while satisfying some of the older fans, I guess, which is kind of cool,
I agree. I think that was the intent, to try to bring in new audiences and please old audiences at the same time, because this is definitely not a mature story. This is very anime, very, very anime. So yeah, if you're not a person that really enjoys anime-like stories, this one will definitely not please you.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, myself this week, I've had a bit of an interesting week with gaming this week. I've been talking to Eric a little bit about Dragon Quest XI. He's urging me to go do some post-game content so I can get that additional ending.
Yes.
So I think I'm going to do that because I don't want to talk about the game and then have people in the comments saying, well, if you would have watched the additional ending, or any comments like that. I want to see everything so that way I can comment on it. But I made a very questionable purchase this week, and it was a very, very much a gut reaction and impulse buy. And some of you are going to think less of me, and I kind of think less of myself, but I enjoyed the purchase nonetheless. So I was at Dollar General. Nothing good happens at Dollar General, but it was around the corner from my apartment, and I was at Dollar General. I was picking up a few things because I didn't want to go to the grocery store, and I saw they had one of those cheap Sega Genesis collections that it's like a system you plug into your TV, and I was like, man, that thing's a piece of crap. I've seen them before. Like, they have terrible resolution. So, but I was looking at it in the box, and I'm like, dude, it's got 80 games on there. And I'm like looking at the games, and everything that's on the Sega collections you could buy for various platforms. It's got Phantasy Star games, it's got Golden Axe, Sonic games, Shining Force. And I was like, I'm not buying this. But then I saw it was on clearance for like $25. And then I saw that if I bought other Sega games, I could insert it inside. Like, it's got a little thing so you can play other cartridges, and you can use an actual Sega controller. So I was sitting there waiting in line because the line was so long, and I kept looking at it. And I was just like, you know what? Screw it. I'll just buy it. Totally stupid, because I'm going to buy the Sega collection for the Switch coming out in December. It's going to have much better versions of all these games. But honestly, I played it for a couple hours yesterday after eating dinner, and I had a lot of fun with it, despite the crap that the fact that the resolution is crap, and I had to do some jerry rigging to get it to look right, and the sound's a little off. Like, it was, $25, and I got 80 games, and I got, I was playing Phantasy Star 2. That was a good time. I got down on some Golden Axe, Shinobi 3. I mean, you can't go wrong. Like the Sega Genesis was just a very, very fun console. And I kind of forgot that growing up, like it was a blast playing that thing. But it kind of these days, I feel not as many people look back on it as fondly as the Super Nintendo or some other systems. But yeah, I bought it, and I don't pretty questionable purchase, but whatever.
Hey,
I enjoyed it.
I got fond memories of the Genesis.
Yeah.
I mean, if you paid like $25 for the thing, I'm sure it's harmless. I think it would be like an issue if it was you're charging the price like of the SNES Classic or the PlayStation Classic, and you have it the way it is. I did hear though that Sega is actually in the works. I forgot. I have to pull the article again, but Sega's in the works of making like a legit in-house like Sega Genesis collection box.
Like an actually decent one, because
Yeah.
Sega's had like the problem. I think they've been basically allowing third parties to make them to like get extra money, and generally speaking, a lot of them have been pretty not great. So if they're actually making one themselves, that's going to be of quality. I think that's going to be very, very popular.
Yeah, I mean the Genesis was a great console too. I mean, I know it's silly to say this, but they really did things that Nintendo don't sometimes. They were willing to be more violent. I mean, in turn, created the ESRB system, but
yeah,
but the more adult-related video games. But I mean, Sega was definitely in the industry pushing the genre just like Nintendo was with their own line of classics. I mean, I can name a handful of Sega Genesis games I loved right now.
Well, I know that what Sega prioritized with their system was basically performance or speed, right? So like that's why you have games like Sonic the Hedgehog that like would just go extremely fast across the entire
fast processing.
Yeah, but the problem, I don't want to say the problem, but the trade-off they made was that evidently the color palette, like the amount of colors that could be on the screen at one time, was like 256 colors or something like that, which sounds like a lot, but the Super Nintendo went for more colors, so it could have something like 2,000 colors on screen at the same time. So I've noticed a lot of times, looking back at it now, a lot of Sega games, they seem very I don't know, that like the color of the scheme of them, there's something that just is not as crisp and clean as a Super Nintendo game. And I think, I'm not sure if it was the best payoff for them to do that, but we got some good games out of it regardless. So
right, on top of that, the sound chip wasn't as good either.
Oh yeah, sound chip's awful.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean you're right. It's the Sega Genesis did sacrifice a couple things in getting that processor in. They tried to remedy that some with the Sega CD and the 32X, but both of those were pretty much a flop.
Yeah.
When they came out, and you know how the Sega Saturn went. Sega hasn't been too great on the hardware until the Dreamcast, and even then the Dreamcast can debatably have some issues with it.
For sure. Yeah, so anyways, I bought that. I've been playing that this week, just kind of, having a little bit of fun when I can in between Dragon Quest. I actually passed out last night playing Phantasy Star 2 in my bed with the little machine. And, it's kind of fun, a nice little nostalgia trip. And I can't say I would recommend it, because if you own any console system at all, or even like a PC, there's other Sega collections out there that have a lot of these games. Are going to be a better resolution, probably better sound. But you know what? It's kind of a retro feel to it, and it was a fun purchase. So that's what I've been doing this week in between Dragon Quest. Let's go ahead and move on to our first topic, though. Oh boy. So last week's podcast, we talked a little bit briefly, maybe a couple of minutes, about the fact that Square-Enix was having a second anniversary stream for Final Fantasy 15. And we were kind of surprised by that because we assumed naturally that either, well, I shouldn't say you assumed, I assumed that they were going to show like some like trailer footage or, some release dates or something like that for, all their DLC. And I was kind of surprised they were going to announce that now because
you weren't wrong. They did announce their DLC date.
They announced a lot of the dates actually. Some of them have already been passed, but instead of actually announcing like release dates, they announced that they are canceling out of the 4 DLCs that were supposed to happen next year for Final Fantasy 15. They're canceling 3 of them. They're apparently going to cancel Episode Arden. That's the only one we are getting, but apparently like 80 or 90% of it was already done. So it would have been more costly for them not to finish it than it would have been to just cancel that one as well. But I found this like when Eric's the one that messaged me about it. I had no idea. I did not watch the stream. I messaged him about it the night before. I was like, "Hey, stream tonight. I'm just going to catch up the highlights tomorrow." I wake up, I go to work, and I get this blip on my phone, and I thought Eric was messing with me because I
didn't watch it either. I just saw all the news articles pop up.
I could not believe this. Like, this, in my opinion, this blows this is like the worst Square Enix event ever. Like previously, before that, I thought the 30th anniversary for Final Fantasy, that was pretty bad, right? They pumped that thing up. They said, "Oh, this is going to be a big year for Final Fantasy." And there's this 30th anniversary. Everyone was expecting a Final Fantasy VII remake trailer or some big announcement, maybe Final Fantasy 16 or something huge. And all we got was $1,000 bottles of wine and a release date for Final Fantasy 12 Zodiac Age Remaster. It was the worst 30th anniversary ever. I think we got like Final Fantasy 14 trailer that we've already seen too. But regardless, it was like the worst event ever. We did a whole podcast about it. This seems way worse because they literally called it a second anniversary stream. They got everyone pumped up. People were excited to watch this. People that were planning on buying this content, and then like people tuned in to watch it, and they just canceled it. Like this does not seem like the correct format to cancel DLC for. Like, why would you do that during an anniversary stream?
I swear, Square-Enix are the only people that would do something like this. They would hype you up for the second live anniversary for this game. And then they'll be like, "Oh, by the way, canceling 3/4 of the DLC we promised you." Oh, right. Man. You don't do that. I mean, it's common sense. You don't do that at an anniversary event. You do that like before, where it's like Square Enix just like announces to like news articles and be like, "Sorry, the 3/4 of them are gone. Sorry that we promised this and not able to deliver it." And then you have the anniversary event and simply show off what you do have.
Yeah,
I mean, a better idea.
So an anniversary of event that made you can go back and watch our podcast previously. We were speculating like what was going to be on the stream. We thought like, oh, they wouldn't have a stream unless they had something exciting to show. Like, that's not the place you cancel material. That's not the place. I can't believe they actually did that. It's the most just perplexing thing I've seen from Square in a very long time. So to be real clear here, previously we're going to get a slight mini episode Aranea, that was going to be involved in episode Arden, I think. That's not coming out. Episode Luna's not coming out. Episode Noctis, surprisingly, is not coming out.
I mean, the whole base FF15 was episode Noctis, but
but
there was supposed to be like a whole new ending in that DLC.
Yeah, so that's just honestly, I wasn't really looking forward to this. I wasn't looking forward to the DLC. I heard some things about the DLC that I didn't really like. The fact that they were going to be changing the timeline a little bit. I didn't really like that, but like it just rubbed me the wrong way that the people that were excited about this, that they told them to tune in for this event and then like got them all excited that possibly they're going to get some more, or like at least get the first peek of some of this content, and they just canceled it. So I don't know. Apparently, uh, the word on the street is the other DLCs, the other character DLCs, they just did not sell as much as they thought it was going to, which I found surprising because I thought they sold quite well. I thought, that was one of the reasons why Final Fantasy 15 was doing so well. But I imagine maybe this is the one instance where, maybe people just watched them on YouTube because the gameplay was pretty spotty. Like that's the main reason people tuned in for it was the story.
I remember Tabata said that one of the reasons he wanted to make the DLC season 2 was to answer questions, about his words, right? To answer questions that were not answered in the original 15. And I think probably Square-Enix looking at sales probably between DLC, the base content, or where the game is in its fiscal years, that they probably thought it wasn't beneficial to get these done, and it's probably their money. They'll probably lose some money doing more of it. Like you said, the episode Arden's about done, so they're like, all right, we already spent money on it. We're way too far into it. Let it go. But we need to take these resources and we need to direct them at making a new AAA game with Luminous Studio. Like, I think they even shut down the idea of doing like the documentaries that we mentioned on podcast a few months ago, that Luminous was going to focus on.
Oh, it was like some evolutionary thing or something like that?
Yeah, on the technical side of things, with like animal documentary, something like that.
Well, here's the thing to kind of feed off that, right? Like this whole thing was kind of spurred off the fact that before this stream, it was uncovered that Square had a $33 million loss that was a result of the Luminous Studio, like that engine, or the new studio that was built around this engine that Tabata was leading. Apparently, there was a $33 million loss. So naturally, I assumed that, okay, they're not doing this Final Fantasy 15 DLC anymore because it's just too expensive. They're not going to do the thing that you just mentioned, the documentary series. Okay, they're scaling back. But then find out they're like, nope, we're still going to do more projects with Luminous. And I'm sitting here thinking, you just lost $33 million. Like, this has cost you, you're bleeding money. And you're going to cancel something that has name recognition that people have signed up saying they want to buy. A lot of people have already bought this, by the way. I think you could pre-order your season 2 subscription, so they've already got the money. Are they gonna? I'm assuming they're gonna return that money.
Yeah, I mean, if that's
they have to.
I don't know if they did that or not, but if they did, then yeah, I'm sure they're going to refund it. But I don't know. If you think about it, the game's almost 2 years now. It's going to hit 2 years in December next month, and they're still making DLC for a game that a large percentage of players have moved on past. So if you're still making DLC for a 2-year-old game, then very likely the sales are not going to be as great as the DLC that comes out. I mean, that's why DLC comes out so soon after a game gets released, because people drop these games off quick and go to the next thing. So developers are trying to get the DLC as fast as they can out there before the hype train dies down on it.
Well, and here's the thing with that, though. And I think there's a certain amount of sense with what you just said, because I think the choice to take their time with this DLC, that was a bad idea, because when you're a public company and you have to report your financials, you need income coming in that's allocated to a project on at least an annual basis. And if you have a project that's going to take longer than a year, shareholders are going to be a little uncomfortable with that. They're unless it's like a huge project, right? So I think if they had at least said, "Hey, this is going to come out in the next year," I think it would have come out, because you wouldn't have to. You could actually tell them, "Hey, we're about to have these sales, etc." But with that said, I mean, DLC does not take that long for them to make. The ones they did release were kind of shoddy, in my opinion. they weren't as high quality as the original game. And from what I understand, there's only like 20, 25 people working on this DLC now. So, I mean, they could get them out fairly quickly. It'd be a quick cash grab. I I imagine they could do them for cheap if they really wanted to. They already have a lot of the assets made. They like it just seems weird to me that they would just cancel it.
I mean, it's expensive. You do have to do like all the cinematography for it
Sure.
again, which I mean, it's a boatload of money to do these DLCs. I'm very sure. Now, this is why I don't agree with these AAA companies trying to make their games into live services, these offline title games, because people move on so quickly to the next game. Like even like with Red Dead 2 that came out, people are enjoying it right now, but then you're going to have the next game come out like this month, and people are going to move on to that and talk about that. So I mean,
Well, I mean,
how can you make your game last for 2 years if your customer base can't last for 2 years?
sure. And I guess what I was getting at was that, yeah, I'm not trying to say it doesn't cost a lot of money to make these, but I imagine it costs less money than to create a whole new game that's going to take 5 or 6 years to come out. Like, this just seems like easy money that they can then couple together and make another release of Final Fantasy 15. They can spread it across all platforms, and it can be the Royal Edition, and they can make even more money. It just seems weird to me that if they're going to continue moving forward with the Luminous Studio, that they would not finish something that's their bread and butter, like their bread and butter franchise. To me, but I agree with you. It does give me pause when I see a lot of these AAA studios wanting to go this route with, story sequences as DLC, and it really makes me concerned for Final Fantasy's future because, I mean, if they're going to cancel DLC that they've announced, I'm glad it wasn't the pivotal story sequences, the episode Ignis, etc., that we actually needed to see as part of the core narrative. I'm glad we got that much.
Well, people are going to. I know people are waiting for me to say this. I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now. I'm glad they canceled all this. I am 100% glad they canceled all of it. Let the game be a mistake. Move on to the next game. Receive feedback from the people that you got on FF15.
Mm-hmm.
Put the money, the resources, the people, move forward, make the next game better. You don't need to remedy this particular situation.
Yeah. I think there's a slight caveat I would add to that. It's just, I'm glad they canceled it, but then I don't like how they canceled it, and I think we're in agreement with that. This was a terrible way to cancel it. They could have done it in a lot more sensitive of a way to the people that were excited about this. But also, I'm glad they canceled it, but then I also wanted them to stop using the Luminous engine because it's caused so many problems. That's why Final Fantasy 15 took forever to come out. I thought with Tabata leaving, I thought since this has cost them $33 million that they would stop using this thing.
We don't know if 16 is using the Luminous engine yet.
Well, I think it's pretty. Well, we can jump into it, but I'm pretty sure that was the plan because Tabata stated publicly many, many times he has zero interest in working on Final Fantasy 16. He said for Final Fantasy 15 he got 4 hours of sleep every night, and it was great for his career, but he's getting too old basically. He doesn't want to do that again.
He's too old. How long has he been in that company for?
Well, that's what he left at his comment that when he initially left. Apparently he left like a week or two ago. They just kept it hidden, but he put that he's going to leave this deal to someone who's younger, right? And I think he's like 43, 44, which isn't that old, but if you're getting 4 hours of sleep every night for 3 years, I mean, he's probably like, dude, I'm not doing this. But he was supposed to be in charge of his own IP. He said he was making his own game from the ground up, and it was just his gig. And then he suddenly leaves Square-Enix and his only comment is, I'm going to make my own studio and make my own IP. Like, you are in charge of a studio and apparently making your own IP with near endless resources, with cutting edge technology, and you decided to leave to go make your own IP. I think what happened was they told Tabata, this studio is bleeding money, $33 million. The project you're working on, it has to be Final Fantasy 16. We cannot risk some new IP flopping. We need something with name recognition. You have to make Final Fantasy 16. And he probably was like, I'm not doing it. And he decided to leave the company over it. That's what I think.
That's a plausible theory. But, I mean, that definitely makes sense because it kind of lines up with him wanting to just focus on new IPs. And it's always possible that the new IP he was trying to do with Luminous, it was just probably like too limiting. Square-Enix was like, coming in, telling him what he has to do and not do, and he probably maybe left out of frustration. But both him and Square-Enix have commented on each other, and they both give positive feedback. I don't know if that's just for, just for the public, to make it look like everything's okay. But on the surface level, there's no bad blood between them. So maybe he legitimately went out to pursue something he truly wanted to do. Maybe similar to Sakaguchi. Maybe he wants to start small titles. And
I don't think he up. Yeah, I don't think he was angry left. I think he just was getting pressured to do. This is total speculation, but I just think that he was getting pressured to do the next Final Fantasy with the Luminous engine, and he was just like, you know what? I don't want to do the past 3 years again. And that's why he put in his announcement that he was leaving the company, his little tweet or whatever. He said he was leaving this to a younger, more ambitious person or something like that. And he didn't say Final Fantasy 16, so that could be something else. But to me, the fact that he's talked about how Final Fantasy 15 was so exhausting for him and so bad for his family life and everything else, I think that to me just tells me that they're pushing him to do that, especially with the fact that the studio is losing money. But obviously we don't know unless he comes out and says, well, that's what they were trying to do. But it just baffles me that this studio is losing money and they're going to cancel the DLC that they had that was going to be guaranteed sales. And I don't know, there's still
sales, but
they already had people already reserved for it. I mean, I'm pretty sure they would have made their money back on it, but they're still going to push forward with this studio despite all the problems that they've had. It's just baffling to me. I mean, from what we understand, word we've gotten is with 15, with the Luminous engine, they weren't even able to get 20% of its capability to run on the PlayStation 4. 20%. That's how hard they're having to work to get that to run on the PlayStation 4. Maybe the fact that the PlayStation 5, I think, is going to be just pretty comparable to the PS4, and how I think it's just going to be a souped up PS4, frankly. That way you have backwards capability. So maybe they're thinking oh, okay, we'll actually be able to use this thing on the PS5. But dude, they've been trying to get their money out of this thing for nearly a decade. It's time to just drop this studio and just go to Unreal Engine. That's fine. Nobody's gonna think twice about this. I don't,
Well, the AAA companies kind of have they're at this point where they kind of need to show that they can create their own technology. The bigger problem with using Unreal Engine 4, and I guess they're willing to make that exception with Kingdom Hearts 3 and FF7, is that Unreal Engine gets about 10% of the cut for every game sold. So if you
compare
have
that
a game that makes as big as Final Fantasy 16, which would probably sell very well. By the way, 15 didn't meet sales expectations. Apparently it sold 8.1 million out of the 10 million that they were hoping to sell. But anyway, I'm sure they're at least trying to weigh in the options of what they can do for 16, and assuming they're not in development of it yet already.
Well, let's take that 10% cut they'd have to give Unreal Engine and compare that to 10 years of development, or the endless amounts of man hours they have to take to get something to run correctly. I think they would come out ahead, if they just went with the Unreal Engine. I mean, if your game did not make enough money after selling 8 point something million copies, whatever you're doing is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know?
Like I said, it's probably more okay on their lesser titles. I don't know if I consider Kingdom Hearts 3 or FF7R lesser titles by any means, but I mean, I guess it's like with Konami, who wanted to create their own engine, the Fox engine for Metal Gear Solid 5, which turned out very well. I don't know if there's some tech race also with the companies, because I mean, I guess something like Crystal Tools engine was pretty okay for FF13 for what it was, but I heard it was very limiting on what
Well,
it could do.
I think Crystal Tools was one of the reasons why 13 took so long. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
So,
yeah, that pretty much goes to my next point, is that whatever you do, don't create a new engine, please. That we don't
well,
need
that's true.
another long development cycle for 16. Just, I mean, 15 came out in 2016. Wouldn't it be the dream for the game to at least come out in 2021 or 2022?
Yeah.
At
Well, I
least.
mean, and I guess that's the silver lining, is that, you know, as far as we know, they're not making a new studio or a new engine. That was one of the things that baffled people about the Crystal Tools engine, was that they basically only used that for like 13 games, and then they just dropped it and made another engine for 15. And it's like, why did you do that? That costs so much money. So, I mean, if they are going to stick with an engine as opposed to creating a brand new one, you know, I'm not a programmer or anything like that. I'm not like a hardware expert, so I can't speak to whether or not that's a good idea. But to me, from a financial standpoint, that sounds like a much better idea than completely starting over with a brand new engine like they've done in the past. You know?
Now, in terms of DLC, I think they need to take a whole new approach to it for FF16. What they need to do is basically take some pages from Witcher 3, which not exactly like Witcher 3, but in terms of create expansions and not have them tied to the main game. Like, you have your complete package, complete $60 package. Woohoo! Final Fantasy 16 was the greatest thing ever. You know, it did everything that people crave in a Final Fantasy, and
Mm-hmm.
then you create whole new content like major side quests, like to maybe like you go to a different whole new region and you take on a major story there that doesn't tie in or interfere with the main story that is present in the other one. Because Witcher
Sure.
3 kind of did that. It's like you have like a whole different adventure and experience over there. And then the game, I mean, and it wasn't as long as the main game, but if they made like an expansion with like maybe like a 15-hour story to it, I mean, that's when it feels like there's an addition to the game, not feel like it's filling in missing spots in the story intentionally, because that doesn't get people's curiosity rising. That just gets
Right.
people frustrated.
Yeah, don't fill in, like, don't leave parts of the game out that is core to the story, like a main party member getting injured. That's not something we need to find out later. But also, you know, don't try to retell the same story with DLC. Like, oh, okay, this will end differently now. You know, which is kind of the route they were planning on going, and they did go with Episode Ignis, giving you the option. But they were planning on going with some of this other DLC that got canceled. Was apparently they wanted to retell certain parts of the story, but kind of have it go like a different route, almost like a choose your own adventure type thing. And that to me is not the best way either. Exactly like you said, go the Witcher 3 route. Like, have something else that is separate from the game, that's still interesting, that's not like a core to the original experience. And you know,
Honestly, I don't think Final Fantasy works well with take your own adventure type things. Maybe little small things that are not relevant to the large scale of things is fine, but the main draw of Final Fantasy for a lot of people is its core story. So when it feels like disjointed and you're picking like five different answers to something that just makes the game wholly completely different, or like a
Yeah.
whole different ending to it. I mean, it's just not the type of story that this fan base is into when it comes to Final Fantasy in particular.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
every game up to this point has had a very cut and clear story straight from beginning to end. No major things like changing the outcome of the story.
hmm Yeah, yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I don't think that it's really uh, ever been something that would appeal to people, at least a fan base, to be able to choose your own way, like in Mass Effect or something like that, where it might affect the outcome of certain events. Uh, I mean, I personally, one of the biggest things I like about Final Fantasy is being able to talk about the story with other people, and and I guess you could have that conversation if you could be like, well, what did you choose? I chose this. I mean, there might be a little bit of that there that you could kind of experiment with.
But which ending is the canon ending?
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem. I mean, I guess they got away with it with Chrono Trigger, right? That like you could do all sorts of things and like get all sorts of characters and have all these multiple endings, but like that kind of worked with like the foundation of the game, the fact that this was a time travel game and that you could change the future and the past, and it's not that you like didn't choose this other answer this time, it's that you already chose that decision last time and now you're choosing this decision because you went back in time. Like that's it's kind of a, I don't know. It kind of works a little bit better cohesively with the theming of the game, but I don't think that's really a good route to go with any Final Fantasy game unless they dramatically change things.
Yeah, it's nice to have some illusion of choice to make it feel like you're more immersed with it. But
hmm
Final Fantasy famously, it's just not been uh, pick your own adventure type of thing. So it's always
Which is
been
fine.
just so when they announce this DLC stuff, it's just baffling to me because it comes off more as, oh, people didn't like the original ending, so here's a more happy ending or more uh, satisfying ending for you. It's like, come on, the damage has been done. We already know what the original ending is. It's
Yeah.
unless you want to make a Final Fantasy 15 a Realm Reborn and just say the original 15 never happened, then
Well, yeah. And the thing is, Square has the ability nowadays to take feedback and implement it in the most jackassery fashion possible to where you didn't even think it was this possible to like be so like incompetent with the way you implemented it. I mean, even with the game features that they built into the DLC, things that people wanted, like the ability to control the other characters. It's not they added that ability, but it's not available from the beginning of the game. You have to unlock it, and then once you unlock it, it's not like you switch to the other character. It's when you switch to the other character, that character magically appears where Noctis was before. Well, that's just dumb. Like I would not even thought about doing it like that, right? Or like
sounds like a mess.
or the ability to drive the car off the road. Like that's been an added feature, but you have to unlock it, I believe, or like install a part. Like why would you do that? Or chapter 13 verses 2 in the game, like people wanted more story, but now it's like an optional story, and if you choose that, you don't get the other part of the story. Like why would you do that?
FF14 is actually pretty famous for this also. They can't just give us something or fix something. They have to make sure, I mean, I love them and don't like them at the same time for this, but they have to find a story reason
Yeah,
put something in. They just can't simply just give you a new feature and just let it be part of the system.
because that's
They,
acknowledging they messed up. That's what they
yeah.
don't like.
Well, 14's an MMO. It always seeks to improve itself.
Sure.
And they always try to make things better. 15's battle system, it feels like they're just admitting there's just like a fault here. It's like, and they're trying to make it as RPG as they can and as action as they can at the same time. And I've said it before, you're trying to make both happen, and because of it, both are at fault for it.
Mm-hmm.
The RPG mechanics hold the action back. The action holds back the RPG mechanics. And end of the day, no one's happy with it, and you made a shallow battle system out of it.
Yeah. How do you feel? And I think that you were kind of alluding to this before. And you actually sent me this article where it states that Square Enix is adopting subscription model for core non-MMO games. They're going to push more DLC. I thought this was kind of an odd article to see because it came at the back of them just canceling DLC. But apparently they're going full force with adopting a more subscription model for non-MMO games.
You see, I don't really know what they mean by it.
Me either.
That's the thing. Are they going to make their like own streaming service similar to like Origin with EA, or are they going to have it where like you go on like a payment plan or pay like a certain amount to them a month and you can play the select titles that they have?
Yeah, that's kind of, I see the draw because I think that stuff makes a lot of money. And that might be kind of cool. Hey, you just pay this much a month and you get access to all these games and potentially new games. I don't know how they could make that work, but if they could make that work, I'm kind of in the middle on it. There's a part of me that just likes the idea that I want to just buy the game, own the game, and I'm sure that would still be an option, but knowing that today you don't even own the game when you buy it. I mean, I bought Final Fantasy 15 and 20 years from now, somebody takes that disc and sticks it in their whatever drive. It's not going to be 15 without them having to go and like download all this extra stuff. And most games are like that. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. I guess I kind of want to see the details regarding how they're actually going to implement that. But it does make me feel uncomfortable that they're not even remotely looking at releasing games like they used to, I'm playing Dragon Quest XI now, and it's a complete game by itself. And I kind of wonder if that's one of the last Square Enix games, at least one of their big projects that's going to be like that,
Well, Dragon Quest is always saved. I mean, the main draw to Dragon Quest is that it's such a classic type RPG, even down to its gameplay or the fact they didn't offer any major DLC with the game at all.
But how much of
making like a core package?
How much of that is because the original creator's still involved with the game, do you think?
Pretty much most of the reason, but...
And isn't he getting pretty old? Like, I imagine he might be down for one more game, maybe, but that's about it.
Kira Toriyama's getting old. I mean, he's still doing Dragon Ball series, so I think he's good. But Yuji Horii and Sugiyama, the sound composer, are definitely getting with age to the point that. But they have said that they have been actively training, like the New Blood, with these Dragon Quest games, and pretty much the New Blood was pretty much there full time with Dragon Quest 9, 10, and 11.
Mm-hmm.
So they, as you can see from the quality of the titles, they have some experience under their belt also. But of course, that was directed under Yuji Horii. Now, similar to Miyamoto with Nintendo, we won't really get to see what this New Blood is capable of on their own terms after they leave. So it is a mystery on what direction the Dragon Quest will go. But I think if they're being trained under these veteran developers, then I think they'll at least try to hold in the spirit of what people like about these titles, even if they decide to go in a new direction.
Yeah, that is heartening to see that they are doing that training and kind of passing the torch in a manner that I think you should. But I guess when I look at it at a more logical standpoint, I just think that if Square Enix comes down and starts pressuring them to put microtransactions or DLC into it to try to make more money, right now Yuji Horii can just say, if you do that, I'm out. Or, he has enough clout with the company. He's a big enough person of him by himself that he can kind of throw some weight around. Whereas, some of the New Blood, they're just an employee there. I mean, they're just going to do whatever they tell them.
Dragon Quest is like their number one game they got to be careful with. They can't simply just go in and just completely change everything to their will, because Dragon Quest it's a national holiday when Dragon Quest comes out in Japan. And what the series banks off of is that nostalgic throwback to way how games were of old, while still bringing in new modern elements at the same time. If people are displeased with a mainline Dragon Quest title that comes out in Japan specifically, Square Enix are in some really hot water, and one they would not be able to recover from.
Yeah,
So
and
they can't just come in and say, we got to change everything to make Dragon Quest a live service now.
you know, here's, I guess I look at it like, if since Dragon Quest, and I know we're getting off on a tangent here, but if Dragon Quest 11, I think it sold pretty well in the States, they could say, well, we have a new market out there, and we could appeal to more gamers if we change it a little bit, right? And whether or not that would hurt them in Japan, that's something to consider. But given their performance with this second anniversary stream of Final Fantasy and some of their other decisions, and I know that's probably more the Final Fantasy side of things, but it just seems to me like, they're not completely thinking straight with some of these ideas,
Yeah,
but
mismanagement at Square Enix right now, it's just like a heavy understatement.
yeah.
I mean, seriously, I mean, like, I know everyone's been asking this, but I gotta ask it too. What in the living hell is going on in that company right now? How can one company just keep making mistake after mistake after mistake, and then just doing all these just like off the wall, baffling things? It's so strange for a company to just do all these things. And it really makes me think it just comes down to poor mismanagement. I think some serious new like management control or like shifts around is just needed in that company. Companies like the Dragon Quest team and the Final Fantasy 14 team and some smaller dev teams are fine. I think it's their main Final Fantasy team, or the teams that they bring in. I know they have like Studio A, Studio B, Studio C type thing. They need to get this under control. They need to have a vision, know what they want, set forth with it, and stop trying to do all these weird, awkward management shifts and new engines and stuff like that. They just need to make one real good Final Fantasy again for people, to get people back in their open arms. 14 A Realm Reborn is good, but it still has that black mark of 1.0. People were very split on 13. People are very split on 15. And I love 12, but there was a slight split with that game also. And with 11 being an MMO, people weren't open to that either. So that was a split also. We got the last really up there Final Fantasy. I would argue it's still 12, but the last lightning in the bottle game was Final Fantasy X.
Yeah, I mean, these days Final Fantasy 12 is kind of looked back more fondly, but I still remember when 12 first came out, and I went and bought a gaming magazine to read some of the reviews for the game, and I was super excited about it. I didn't have enough money to get the game yet, and that was the first time that I read a Final Fantasy review where it wasn't completely favorable. The person that was reviewing it, and I think it was, I don't know if it was IGN, it may have been Game Informer, I can't remember, but they weren't completely like, this is a horrible game, but they said, like, to them, like, the story was disappointing. There were certain story beats that didn't feel fully fleshed out. And I don't want to get into like a big discussion on Final Fantasy 12, but I do think at the time that was a letdown for a lot of people. Now, if they know what they know, going back knowing what I know now, 12 is a masterpiece, because it's only going to get downhill from there. Besides, like you said, 14, the 2.0 and forward, they did a really good job with that. But yeah, man, they just need something of quality to come out that's not got some kind of controversy surrounding it. They need
exactly. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about it real quick, because I do have a few thoughts about the. They did release a short trailer for episode Arden. Did you get a chance to watch it?
Yeah, it's basically him 30 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put it up on the screen while I'm talking about this because I'm kind of just there's something weird about it. But essentially, like you said, it's him 30 years ago, and he's walking around doing all these crazy things. But it's really weird because it shows him fighting King Regis, and this isn't really a spoiler for the game, but in the movie of Kingsglaive and the game, I think, like King Regis didn't really know who Arden was. He knew he was the Chancellor, but he didn't know like who he was, right? And you see Arden like summoning like the all the swords and stuff like King Regis has. So clearly this guy has powers that Regis has.
That Regis is like, hey, I remember you.
Yeah, like why? Like this does like are they not even trying to like like be cohesive at all? Like they just threw Regis in there because like I don't know, they thought it would sell. I mean, like I feel like that they didn't even try to make it cohesive with the game.
Sounds like a poor attempt to give more character depth to King Regis that we didn't really get.
Yeah, unless they explain in there that maybe like after Arden, I don't know, beats Regis senseless, he wipes his memory or something, which will be stupid. But I thought that was a very, very odd thing to put in your game.
They might do that now after fans have probably already criticized. They're like, oh crap. Okay, King Regis loses memory after fight. Done.
and then that'll be in day one patch.
Yeah, day one patch, fixing up. Whoopsie.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing with that is I thought episode Arden was going to be like 2,000 years ago or whatever, like when he was initially a good guy and like his whole turning to being evil. Because that's kind of like what it was promoted as, I thought.
Sure, but you gotta, it costs less on the assets if you just go back 30 years. You can still use a lot of the same structures.
Just use episode Ignis King Regis and like have them do some fights. I don't know. Like this seems. Well, initially the whole idea behind this was they were going to take more time with it, and it was going to be a higher quality product than the other DLCs. Not to say that they were terrible DLCs or anything. I personally had a good time on the gameplay front with episode Gladio. Story was obnoxious. Gameplay was pretty good in that one. But
it's left to be determined, but so far on the surface level, episode Arden seemed like an additional content and not fill-in content. So yeah. I will give it that's not praise.
Sure. Even though it doesn't make sense. But yeah.
It makes sense.
And then there's going to be the episode Comrades or whatever, the multiplayer version of Final Fantasy 15. That's going to become its own game instead of just being DLC. And that's kind of interesting. I only played that for a couple of hours, and I mean, it didn't seem terrible to me, but it didn't really seem like something I wanted to play. And I don't think I'll play it as a standalone game either. Do you see yourself playing this?
I still haven't played it today.
Yeah. So that seems odd to me. And then I guess they're going to do some kind of crossover with Final Fantasy 14 or...
Yeah, the weird thing is 14 hasn't shown... Usually when they do crossovers, like with Final Fantasy 14, 14 shows off its thing, and then like the other title shows off their thing. I looked on the FF14 site. They don't have any information about a crossover at 15 yet. It's only 15 crossing with 14 right now.
Sure. So, I don't know. I'm sure we'll get some information about it soon.
It's weird hearing that Mikote woman not be like British sounding, because everyone in 14 pretty much sounds British.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I guess look out for that if you're interested in that. But easily the biggest news story coming away from that was that they're canceling all this other material. I think they're also coming out with some kind of manga or something for episode Arden. I don't know. Something I'm not really that interested in, but there is that out there as well. So that can be kind of cool. But yeah, so that was an exciting, disappointing all around stream. So
What do they say in
Interesting
The
stuff.
Last Jedi? Let it all die.
Yeah.
Let the past be the past.
Yeah, I kind of like after, and we can transition to the next topic here in a moment. But I was kind of thinking about it after this most recent stream with Square, that like, where are they going to be 10 years from now? Are they going to be some, like, are they going to be like Atari or something, or like that's like a shell of its former self, and it's like struggling financially? I'm sure it won't be that, because Final Fantasy sells well and everything else, but I can't believe that they've gotten to the point where they can be literally like anything at all. They can just goof up to such epic degrees. Like it just makes me really concerned for the company to make any kind of rational decision.
Yeah, I think I mean, don't take my word for it, but my guess is the company can afford to take some hits. The thing is, they don't want to take the hits, but it didn't get as bad as FF14. Development costs that put them in the red for a good while till Orion Reborn came and they came back to the green. That
Yeah.
and their arcade sales. They have a lot of other stuff that's giving them profit. I think the biggest problem that they have is they overestimate things too much. Like I mentioned before, they wanted to sell 10 million units for FF15. They made it to 8.1 million.
I'm sure it's gonna get. I don't know if it'll get to 10 million, but I'm sure by the
Didn't make the fiscal year, I heard. So at this point, I think it's irrelevant if they make it to 10 million or not.
Yeah. Well, yeah. At this point, they're kind of moving on, but yeah, I mean that could be part of it too. They're just too ambitious, and they won't recognize when they do succeed. It just, I don't know. It's sad because they used to be an amazing company, and I guess today they're not a terrible company, but it just it doesn't seem like it's going in the right direction.
I've already accepted that they're not the same company they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's sad. Sad. What are you gonna do?
I love Squaresoft. I love Squaresoft to death, and I mean, I still have this loyalty to Square-Enix, but at the same time, like it's because I have that type of loyalty to the company that I feel the most need to criticize it.
Mm-hmm.
Like a tough love type of scenario. So, sure. I mean, that's why I'm a little more tougher on that. If it's something like EA, I'm like, whatever. But Square Enix is a beloved company for me, so I'm definitely going to be more passionate towards it. So when they make mistakes, it's going to get me more riled up than, say, EA did another microtransaction thing. It's like, I don't really care too much about that. But, I mean, that's the company I care about. Like, if Nintendo makes a big mistake, like with Zelda or Mario or Metroid, like Metroid Other M, that's going to get me passionate. That's going to get me fired up.
Yeah. I think the first thought that occurred to me when I first saw this news was, I was kind of irritated that they did what they did the way they did it, but B, I thought to myself, well, this is a net positive. Tabata is not directing Final Fantasy 16 for certain. That is good news for me.
Yeah,
because I don't like the way that guy does stuff. He seems like a great guy, but
he just doesn't have a great track record. It's like Type 0, Third Birthday, Crisis Core. Crisis Core is arguably probably his highest rated game. And even then, that's met with like a lot of criticism. Like it had like an awful leveling system, and he added elements of story to FF7 that were either unnecessary or just like ruins what was good about it in the original FF7 story. Genesis.
Well, he was on record saying that he's never even played Final Fantasy 7. He just read like development logs and like scripts and like that were given to him to kind of get him updated on the main story beats and kind of the relevance of the game to the PlayStation, but he never actually played it. So I think that's kind of why you kind of run into that with that game and some of the other Final Fantasy games. He wasn't a fan.
Now, I will say this. I believe I already brought it up here before, but someone made a really good point to me that Tabata may be like actually a good producer, because in all fairness, he did start Final Fantasy 15 like in 2012 roughly, and the game came out at end of 2016. So he was able to at least get the ball rolling.
Yeah, well, I think he's good. I think he's a great manager. I just don't think he's a good storyteller. And I just think that...
Great producer, awful director.
Yeah, I mean, he operated with 4 hours of sleep apparently every night. So I'm willing to give him a little bit of a curveball here and there.
Yeah.
Or a curve, I should say. So,
despite my criticisms of 13, which I think a lot can be blamed on the Crystal Tools engine they used. I mean that doesn't completely excuse all the awful things that happened in 13. But I think Katase is a pretty good producer, at least.
well,
so
I think
I wouldn't
he's
mind having him produce FF16.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I thought the same thing. I mean, Katase has a great track record. He directed 6, 7, granted with Sakaguchi breathing down his neck. He did 8 largely by himself in a year and a half, and that's kind of why it has some of the issues that it does. He got a small delay with Final Fantasy X, but he still got that thing out on time. And he got Final Fantasy 13. I mean, it had some issues, but he produced that series. And
I mean, on a technical level, the game is just fine. It is a complete package. It's just met with a lot of questionable design decisions.
Right, and I think he kind of left a lot of that to the people under him. But as far as just getting the stuff out on time, like, I mean, I know 13 took a little while, but I mean, he got 2 more games out and on the same console. I mean, I think he's a good. He's a good in the middle from where Tabata is, just being a total get it out on time no matter what, and a crazy artist like you have with Nomura, who doesn't care about timetables at all. I think Katase is a good, like, right down the center. Like, we're going to care about the timetable, but it also has to be reasonable quality. I agree with that. I think he could produce 16.
I'll close my thoughts about this with this. You know what I really want to see happen with FF16?
What's that?
Not only be a succeed, but I want it to be by someone that we have no idea existed. Like, this new blood just comes in and does such a fantastic job on it that he becomes like the next rock star of the RPG industry. I think we're in due for one of those now.
Yeah, I mean, these people are getting old, man. I mean, they're in their 50s, and I think Sakaguchi's like 60 now. Like, you know, yeah, you got to have some new people coming in and redesigning these games. So I'm sure it's going to happen eventually.
Or Matsuno make another Final Fantasy again. Or one of the two.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know what that guy's been up to lately, but that would be cool.
He's been doing FF14 content.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. They can't keep him that, like...
Return to Evilise?
Is this 40 hours a week busy? I mean...
Developing content for 14 is a very busy thing.
I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Somehow I doubt he's the guy, like, in Photoshop, like... or whatever. Like, I think he's a little bit higher on the food chain there, but yeah, I'm sure he is very, very, very busy. We just don't see it. So, let's move on to our next and final topic.
Yeah, we definitely made the most out of that one.
Yeah. So we had a recent kind of discovery that Sony's using a emulator for the PlayStation Classic. That wasn't a surprise that they're using an emulator, but they're using the PCSX emulator, which is something that you can download for free right now if you Google it, and it's something that's been around for like 20 years. And a lot of people thought this was kind of ironic that Sony's doing this because, back in the day, and I still understand, but they used to have that program Bleep or whatever, or Bleem, where you could play PS1 games on your computer, and Sony sued the crap out of them. I still understand that because I think that thing came out while the PlayStation was still on store shelves, and they were like, no, you can't be doing that.
Yeah, but emulate us, well, emulate you.
Yeah. So They're doing this, but a lot of people have pointed out, hey, you want $100 for this console. There's not that many great games on it. I mean, there are some real classics on there, but there's not. It's missing a lot of games that people wanted, and you don't have things like analog sticks, which is something people wanted, and people just figured that you were trying to cut costs because it took you so much money to make such a quality product, and then it comes to find out that there's zero labor cost for building the emulator because you just use something that's already available, and it's made people question, what is the profit margin on this? Why don't we have better games on this? Why don't we have analog sticks? Why isn't this less than $100? Why should I buy this? Why don't I just emulate games on my PC? That's basically the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, and you would get more options than what's currently being provided.
If I was the person who made that emulator, I'd be thinking right now, can I sue them? I'm not sure.
I think they got permission. I don't know. I'm sure they're giving them something, but I don't know, because they apparently there was an on-screen menu.
They don't need to either. I mean, unless the guy has like a certain program in there that belongs to him, and they're using a part of his program despite being an emulator towards theirs, he could sue for that. But at the same time, Sony can come back and say, well, we can sue you for making an emulator of our product.
Yeah. Well,
it sounds a bit messy. I don't know the legal ramifications of it, but
yeah. Well, I know that. I'm trying to remember because I kind of have files that I just transfer over from each new computer, and I try not to go and download too much of this stuff. But do you still need to, if you download a PlayStation emulator now, do you still have to go find like BIOS files and stuff, or is that for the PS2?
It's for the PS1 also, I believe, but I mean,
because I know that was the part.
It's not hard to find.
Yeah, but I know that was the part that made it illegal, right? So you could download the emulator just fine, and it was completely legal. You just couldn't play anything with it unless you went and found the BIOS file, which was the illegal part.
That is true.
So, anyways, yeah, but I don't know how this is working out legally. But I guess one of the things that was kind of interesting about this also that I didn't mention at the beginning of this was that the emulator that they're using, it's a specific version of that emulator that supported and currently supports network play, so you can play with other people over the internet, and a save rewind feature, so you can rewind your game if you die or whatever you made the wrong decision. You can rewind the game and play back from where you were. These were two features that were in the emulator that is not in the PlayStation Classic, despite the fact that the PlayStation Classic is using that emulator. So they literally took these features out of the emulator.
Oh yeah, Sony doesn't want you to have so much freedom with this device.
Yeah, so it's just so this free thing I can go download has more features than the thing you want me to pay $100 for.
Chances are people are going to crack this PS Classic
and
be able to add more to it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's 100% the reason a lot of people are going to buy it.
The modding community is. It's like, well, thanks for giving us a PCSX in a small form. I don't have to go buy a Raspberry Pi now.
Yeah.
Even though a Raspberry Pi is cheaper.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really don't think I'm going to buy this. I was very excited about it when they announced it, and we were kind of contemplating what some of the games were going to be. And even of the 5 games that they announced, we thought 2 or 3 of them were kind of questionable. But once we've gotten the whole lineup of the games, and now that I'm finding out that it's basically they didn't even put any real work into it, it almost seems kind of rushed that they just went out and got this emulator, and that's been tested over 20 years. They know it works with a lot of games. They don't have to do a lot of their own testing, and they can just stick it in there and get it out the door. It just doesn't make me feel too confident with the product. And a lot of the reviews that are coming out, early reviews for the console, they're not saying it's a bad purchase, but it's not. It's very bare bones. Apparently, it doesn't really give you many options to mess with any of the games. And apparently some of the games actually lag a little bit, like they don't play at 60 frames per second. Like Tekken 3, for example, it apparently lags, which is very odd for a PlayStation 1 game. So this doesn't make me feel good about this. I think Nintendo's going to crush them once they come out with the N64 Classic. It's going to have way better games, and I don't know. Nintendo's doing dumb stuff too. Like I think it pretty much got proven that they sold everyone a a downloaded ROM of one of their Mario games. You know, so they're not much better, but at least they put a little bit more work into these things, you know.
Oh, they got a better selection of games. I think that's probably the biggest crime with the PlayStation console. I mean, I had no plans to buy one before, but seeing the reviews and seeing how the interface and how it all works, it's like, man, it just solidified that. And it's pretty cool it has the PS1 like looking interface, but it's just everything I saw, it's just like completely bare bones. And I mean, unless you're like just someone who does not have like a PS3 or a Vita or anything like that, I guess it serves its purpose, but you're not going to get more than that. You're not going to. I don't think you're getting your $100 worth out of it. Yeah. Essentially, it's got some great games in there, like Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy VII, Wild Arms, but this is like very few in between, like a lot of not so fondly remembered games. And I think this device can only be but so charming, because I think if there's any age, there's definitely timeless games on the PS1, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, there are a lot of games that do not hold up. The Polygon era that started pretty much with the PlayStation has a lot of games that don't hold up well. The SNES, however, is something that does hold up very well. A lot of games on there are very memorable, like timeless. You know, it's just a hard buy with the PS1 Classic.
Well, I just don't even think that it's really a good selection of games, right? At least the SNES Classic, when you look at those games, you think, okay, these are classics for the era. These are games that were great then, that a lot of people liked. When you look at the list of games that are on the PS1 Classic, there are some big heavy hitters like Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII, for sure. But no one, I don't want to say no one, because there'll be somebody on the internet that will say they enjoyed it, but okay, Grand Theft Auto was not popular on the PlayStation like it was on the PlayStation 2. It didn't find its stride till the PlayStation 2. The Persona series did not really get that popular until, at least over in the West, and this is the Western version we got, until the PS2 era. I mean, they picked games that were popular later, but they didn't pick games that were definitive for the PlayStation. It's not a nostalgia trip to play this thing. You're not playing Parappa the Rapper. Like, I know why they don't have Tony Hawk, but I mean, there's so many games that just are not on there. The fact that they don't have Crash Bandicoot. I mean, Crash Bandicoot, when I was a kid, like, I thought Crash Bandicoot was like basically the Sony mascot. I mean, like, he was in commercials. Yeah, and like the fact that he is not, we don't have a Crash Bandicoot game on here is a freaking crime. It's just crazy.
No Crash, no Spyro, no Tomb Raider. These are three things that made the PlayStation.
Yeah.
What it was. I don't know if Activision just stepped in and that they think that it'll be stepping on their toes with the Crash and Spyro remakes. But, I mean, those are two titles that definitely made PlayStation win. It's Parappa the Rapper not making it, now that you bring it up. That's a bit baffling. That didn't make it in. I mean, people can kind of write it off as a filler title maybe, but it's still an iconic PlayStation game that they clearly still have rights to.
Yeah, or not even in, like, Castlevania that didn't make it on there. It's just very, very odd. And it seems like they just cheaply threw this thing out there and tried to be a cash grab with just using this emulator that's already available, throwing it on there, putting zero effort into getting the internet play work or the rewind work. They didn't even bother to put analog sticks on it. It's just apparently the games don't even run at 60 frames per second half the time. It's just it looks like what it is a cash grab. It doesn't look like it's an actual attempt to promote their brand at all.
Yeah. On top of that, I actually heard from someone else that Rainbow Six that they put on there wasn't even popularized by the PlayStation. It was popularized by PC. Then it was ported to PlayStation later.
Yeah, and apparently the PlayStation version is not very good compared to the PC version.
That'd be like saying like Diablo was like gained its popularity on PC, but then like it had a kind of a shoddy PlayStation version, like a playable PlayStation version, but the PC version was like the superior one. Clearly, it's kind of the same scenario here. Like the Rainbow Six was clearly superior on the PC because it was built for it.
Mm-hmm.
Then it came to the PlayStation, and like, yeah, this is the game we need to get on there. This is the one everyone likes playing. I kind of feel like sometimes this was like someone's personal choice, and then someone came in and said, okay, you can have 2 to 3, but then we got to put what people actually want in there.
Yeah, it's just odd choices. I mean, they could have even, if they didn't want to choose some of the Crash games that have been remastered, they could have chose like Crash Team Racing, for example. That would have been a possible choice they could have put on there. So I think there's a lot of options they could have picked that would have not been as bad as Mr. Driller or something like that.
I can kind of understand the scenario with Crash and Spyro if Activision was stepping in on that, but I don't really see much excuse for not having Tomb Raider on there.
Yeah,
that's a very iconic PlayStation game. And since they have Final Fantasy VII on there, they clearly have an agreement with Square-Enix somewhere there. And I think getting Tomb Raider on there was probably the first Tomb Raider or the second one. I mean, they're both good games, but I think the first one's probably more iconic. I don't know, but the Japanese side got better games. I mean, it's not the most ideal lineup on their side either, but they definitely did get some more iconic games that people like than the NA version.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of polish this off and then we can read some of the comments, but I think that, including myself, a lot of people assumed that we missed some of these games that we wanted to be on there was because the profit margin was going to be so small for Sony, because a lot of these games were not, their own games. And that was one of the reasons why I found it perplexing they didn't put Legend of Dragoon on there, because they own that title and they wouldn't have had to have paid licensing for that game. But now that we found out that, well, no, there's no labor cost really involved as far as building an emulator for this game, for these games, getting it to work, play testing it, putting in features. The features are pretty bare bone. It runs at 720, not 1080. No analog sticks. I mean, I think the profit margin on this is actually quite high. So it's just disappointing that they couldn't sacrifice some of that profit to maybe pay a little bit more licensing and have some other games that people actually are nostalgic about.
Yeah.
I don't want to play games I've never played before on the PlayStation because they are dated. They are old. So.
Yeah, and also at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. I'm kind of more baffled by the business decisions themselves. But at the end of the day, all these titles you can get in some way in a high quality fashion for much less than what this device is giving. I mean, you could write this device off. You don't need to get this. There's so many other ways to play these PlayStation 1 classics that it's seriously nothing to get worked up about.
Yeah, for sure. But anyways, let's jump into some of our comments here. We'll kind of breeze through this because our Final Fantasy portion of the podcast went quite long.
Our usual Final Fantasy beatdown.
Yeah, we just need a Tabata beatdown segment.
He's not around to beat down anymore.
I know. Now I feel like I have to support him.
I have to wait till he starts his new studio to start saying things.
He's unemployed. He's unemployed. Anyways, So last week on our episode Diablo's Mobile Meltdown and our comments on the PS1 lineup and some other very interesting topics, Toby Peralta, he says, man, this whole Diablo thing was insane. Like the sketchy Chinese mobile game devs, the claims that it's just a reskin, the poor timing of the game, the response, it just keeps getting out of control. Yeah, I totally agree with that. The Diablo thing was just really, really wild. And I think after we made that podcast episode, they doubled down on their comments and they said they were going to make more mobile games based on some of their other franchises, which got people even more irritated.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, the game has a right to exist. Realistically, not talking about the PC side of things, but mobile side of things, it's not necessarily a bad idea to put a game like this on the mobile. I'm not going to say how the execution, because the execution sounds questionable to be sure, but a large part of Blizzard's sales are from China or other Asian countries. And the largest platform by far and more widely accepted in the West is mobile. So this game, I really think, or when they announced it, was more for shareholders and the Asian audiences to the east.
Well, and here's the thing about that, though, and I didn't know this. I think I learned about this from the YouTube channel Spawnwave. Very good gaming news channel, and I think he's got a podcast that's very entertaining. But he was talking about BlizzCon, and he said that, well, you know, E3 that's for investors. That's where they go out and get investors excited. But BlizzCon's always been a fan-based thing. He said that, you know, they got 2 or 3 hours of cosplay and all this type of thing, and it's traditionally been something that's geared more towards fans. So I agree with you. I don't think the fact that they're making a mobile version of Diablo, I don't think that that's a sin. I mean, it is very profitable. Why would they not do that? But I do see some of the anger and how it was presented. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the timing of the announcement, I just think was very off. I think, like, first off, it's something, like I said last week, should have been announced alongside a bigger title. I don't know if they intentionally didn't want to step on their own toes with Diablo Immortal coming off as small, because I do think that they legitimately think that they're making a good product here, and they wanted to show it off, and it just didn't turn out in their favor. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt of that.
It's just weird they didn't know it would have such a negative reaction. Like, that was surprising to them.
Yeah, they were definitely announcing it to the wrong group of people at BlizzCon, who are pretty much, the majority of them are hardcore PC players there. If you bought a ticket for BlizzCon, very expensive it is, and to fly down there, I'm very sure the thing you didn't want to hear is a mobile game.
Yeah, for sure.
So I definitely understand that side, but on the business side, I understand why a game like Diablo Immortal exists and why they want their IPs to go there. And I say to myself, as long as they're still making their core IP titles, which they have said they are. They said there's multiple Diablo projects in the works and multiple other titles made for other franchises also. Like, we got Warcraft 3 Remaster coming. I say, fine. I don't have to play the mobile game. It's for a different audience. Let them play it. From what I see, it's being made by a different team and has some input from core team members of Blizzard. But I don't think to the point that, like, they're being completely taken away from their core IP franchises that they're working on.
Yeah, I mean, they are outsourcing a lot of this, so it's not like they have around the clock team of 100 and something people working on it. That's true.
Yeah. I know I was bouncing on a little bit last week, but I'm being a little more sincere this week.
Yeah. I think it's just the way it was presented, more or less, not the fact that they're making a mobile game. So
yeah.
Let's see here. And a real quick kind of analogy to that. I mean, Final Fantasy 15, A New Empire, terrible mobile game, total microtransactions out the wazoo. But I mean, Square Enix didn't make that like their main event, right? That's just something that kind of appeared on the internet, and people that are interested in that, they can go do that. But it wasn't, as far as I remember, it wasn't like they had a, it wasn't like they had a second anniversary stream and announced a mobile game. They just canceled everything instead. But yeah, anyways, so there's a way to go about it, and people won't be as upset. Let's see here. We have BioPhoenix, and he says, I heard of Stella Dues. I can't ever say that, but have yet to play it. But I loved the look of the game as a really cool sprite animation. Yeah, I still have that game. I played a little bit more of it, just a little bit, but I've been primarily just trying to bust through Dragon Quest, and I got on a little bit of a side adventure with that Impulse buy with the Sega games. But I plan to jump back into that once I'm done with officially done with everything with Dragon Quest. But it goes on this. What's up?
Kind of interesting getting that game. I wonder how much it is on eBay.
It's. I think I paid like $15 or $20. It wasn't that much, and I was at a video game store, so it might be, a little less. I found out also it's got the same composer from Final Fantasy Tactics, and Final Fantasy 12. So it's really got that Tactics vibe to it. But he goes on to say. Yeah, he goes on to say the PS1 classic list. There is a few odd choices. I was surprised they put Persona 1, but as much as I love that series, I don't really like 1 that much, but I do love 2, which is the one I don't like.
That is an interesting thing. 1 is definitely not favored in comparison to 2. I think Persona 2 would have been a much better choice to be on there than the first game.
Yeah, and I don't think that should have been a main attraction either. So, but anyways. He says mostly for the story, but the gameplay I still like, even if it's kind of slow. I had some pizza before this, guys, so sorry. He says I was surprised they put Persona 1 he felt it was kind of slow. I agree. Also, I feel they should put Twisted Metal 2 instead of 1. Totally agree, since that one still plays great. I actually like Intelligence Cube. It's one of the better puzzle games you can get. And it's also a pretty expensive game, going for like $50+ bucks. So having it on there is easy access, which I'm glad you gave us that kind of context, BioPhoenix, because that kind of makes me feel like, okay, they're trying to give a rare game on here as opposed to just some cheap game. So I'm glad you said that. But he goes on to say, but the version of Mr. Driller and Rainbow Six are pretty crappy, so I don't know why they put those. Otherwise, it's an okay list, just strange, but it's bound to happen with 20 that a lot of good games will not make the cut due to the PS1 having a huge library. Well, you know what the worst RPG... Oh, okay, he's moving on to the worst RPG segment. Well, you know what the worst RPG I played is Eternal Quest on the PS2. I saw your video on that. You did not like that game. But Yu-Gi-Oh! False Bound Kingdoms is close second. I've never played that game, but... I actually don't think I've ever played any Yu-Gi-Oh games, but
yeah, we both wanted to say Quest 64 last week, but we were like, nah, that's too easy.
Yeah, good thing he actually put that in his comments. You can't say this game. There's a small caveat. Okay, so then we have Leon, and he says, I agree with you guys on the dullness of the PS1 games listing, but for me personally, I think I'm going to get it mainly because, well, besides FF7, Metal Gear Solid, since I don't have a PS3 or a Vita, having a version of the Metal Gear that I can play on an HD TV that just made the day. The game was huge back when it came out, and it's my favorite of the series. I agree they could put more JRPGs. I was hoping Valkyria Profile or Legend of Dragoon, maybe Breath of Fire 4, but well, there are other games that I missed to play, and now I'll get the chance to play them. And also, it got me in the nostalgic aspect. The PS1 era was a big, decisive part of my life. I basically turned from SNES to PS1. It was a huge gap of console gaming for me due to economic reasons, and since I don't have a PS1 console anymore, this will make a good acquisition for my personal collection, but they could work harder on the list. Silent Hill, Clock Tower, Parasite Eve for the North America version.
Japan got Parasite Eve.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Japan got a little bit better than we got, but I do think those would be some good additions for sure. He says the Diablo thing. Well, I've never been a huge fan of Diablo and mobile games, Personally, I prefer console-oriented games because if I play something on a mobile, it might be on the public transport on my way to work and back home, so it's a tricky thing to do. And to engage into a game with that much of a content and multiplayer, come on. It's one thing I don't like. When developers treat mobile games as if it was a console or a PC game. If I want to play a game at home and I have a console or a PC, then I won't use my phone or tablet to play. But maybe that's just me. Actually, I'm more hyped for the remastered version of Warcraft 3. That game was awesome, and an upgraded version of that game. It's just a low blow into nostalgia. I'm definitely gonna get it, and I love that it's a mix between RPG and tactics with that army kind of battle, just like the old days of Age of Empire. What do you think of those types of games from Blizzard? And he goes on to say, in the cinematics, damn, if I can say that a game developer, it's on top on creating cinematics and concept art, it's Blizzard and Square-Enix. It'd be nice to hear from you guys some more on the artistic and conceptual side of the games. Eric, do you have anything regarding that kind of? Yeah, the.
I'm not the biggest fan of RTSs. I won't play just any RTS, but Blizzard always got the exception. I loved Warcraft 1, 2, 3, and I loved StarCraft 1. I was okay with StarCraft 2. I thought it was pretty neat to get through the main campaign, but I didn't find any appeal after that. Mm-hmm. But I do like the games because they do a very good job on keeping things simple and have a lot of depth to it at the same time. Blizzard somehow just knows how to strike that right balance with their RTS games, and I'm always grateful for them for it because a lot of RTS games, and I enjoyed Age of Empires also. I enjoyed throwing insults at the opposite team and make them come try to invade me. It's kind of like a come at me bro type of thing. Yeah. But the thing I always had a problem with RTS is they were always just way too complex, and not to the point that I couldn't understand it if I took time to play with it. But I'm a kind of a person that likes to pick up something and just start playing it, and easy to understand to go in and let the depth of the content be itself. And RTSs a lot of times are not built to be that way. They're built to be complex. Yeah. And learning its complexities, which I'm not going to fault it for, but that's just a lot of times it's not my cup of tea. But Blizzard, sure, there's just like I said before, it just struck that right balance for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a niche audience for that type of stuff, and I agree with everything that you just said. Let's see. He goes on. He says, and as I was listening to your previous and recent comments on Red Redemption, I was wondering that I thought I kind of don't like very much the open world mission based games. Even if they have like a linear story, I used to get really bored. Like it happened to me with Assassin's Creed Origins. It was nice and all, but the 10th hour of doing the same thing over and over, I grew tired of it. But then I remember games like Batman, Metal Gear Solid, The Phantom Pain, amazing. And the one I'm playing now is The Lord of the Rings, Shadows of War. Those are a real sandbox with some missions and a storyline, but in an open world. So I think it depends on the player and the likes and the dislikes of certain genres and games, because I don't see myself playing the Wild West, but killing orcs or fighting criminals in Gotham, those are things that I like. So that's why I'm really thinking about getting the new Spider-Man game. What do you guys think about the mission-based games like Shadow of War, Spider-Man, and the likes? Does the repetition and gameplay get balanced if the theme and genre of the game is more of your likes? I think, in short, yes. And I think that's across the board in all genres. I mean, even with, like, let's say JRPGs, I'm going to be more, because I like science fiction so much, I'm going to be more accepting and more forgivable towards games that are in that setting that may not be objectively as good as some other ones, right? That's why some stuff in Star Ocean doesn't bother me as bad as some other people, is because I really like that setting. I like the setting of, just this sci-fi world. So I'm willing to kind of forgive certain things that I might not appreciate in a different setting, but that's a little bit different from what you're saying with open world games. But Eric, what do you think?
Well, setting is definitely a big thing. Like, some people may not be in the West or into a space type of thing. I think the biggest difference between how Rockstar sets up their stories and how a game like, say, Batman Arkham City sets up their story is that the storylines, like in the Batman game, it just flows so naturally, and then like side missions just get weaved in on the way of that main story. That like you can take your time to go out and do that, but there's still the overall game still just has that like that nice focus on the main story.
Yeah.
Rockstar games, despite the story being good, I always criticize how the flow of it goes. Like I feel like I'm just getting chunks of story at a time, like kind of like in an episodic manner. Like I said it like last week. My criticism is that like it feels very mission structured. So like parts of the story are just part of the map, and you have to go to that story. And like in a game like Batman, it's like I feel like the like each event I do is just like leading me to the next thing for that. And in a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, I feel like I do this, and then it's like it throws me back into the open world, and it's like, why don't you go choose what you want to do next? You want to continue doing a story with this character or this character, and eventually something happens. And they're well told and well executed stories. But if you,
you
but
don't like
it's just that,
westerns, then it's not. Yeah, it's not as appealing.
well, it's not even that. It's just that the flow of the story is not going the way it should, and it's been like that for almost every Rockstar game I've played. Like even Red Dead Redemption 1 was like that, but I like the character John Marston so much that it was just entertaining seeing how in an episodic fashion he went about something. And I'm not saying it's bad or anything necessarily. It's just that if you're someone that's into very linear type storytelling, it can become destroying for you very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree. And that was an interesting observation, Leon, that you made about yourself that like, hey, despite the fact that these other games, like you put, like he points out, like killing orcs and fighting criminals in Gotham, these are things that he enjoys from a concept. So the fact that it's basically the same process as doing something in the Wild West, like killing a bank robber or something, the fact that it's like really the same process, just with a different aesthetic and like a different vibe going about it, that he enjoys that, but he doesn't enjoy as much in this other setting that isn't really his cup of tea. That is interesting because it really comes down to whether or not you're getting immersed into that world. And with Red Dead Redemption 2, like that's the whole point of the game. The realism is that you would get immersed into the game. It's supposed to be that real because they want you to be immersed into the game like it's almost a real world. And it's almost like it kind of turns some people off. So it's kind of interesting that it's having that effect on some people. So interesting. Then we have Chris Ewan. I think I said your last name correctly. He said, nice. I appreciate the in-depth look at the PS1 classic games, especially as my PS1 collection was limited to Square-Enix games plus Medieval. Appreciate the comment there, and it's a quick shout out. If Chris's Adventure, his game that he's been working on, I'm looking forward to that coming out. So let us know when it comes out, and I'll play it for a while and talk about it on here. And
yeah,
I'm sure
I saw the trailer, man. That looks good. Looks like you put a lot of time into it.
Yeah, just shoot me a message if it's when you have a ready version, and I'll play it, and we can. We don't have thousands of viewers on here, but we'll give it some support because I think it deserves it. So
I like platformers, so
yeah,
I'll definitely try
it for sure. I got to play a demo of it, and it was really good, but that was I think a year ago. So then we got Leanne B. She says, "You guys didn't talk about the best RPG that came out this week, Deltarune. It's probably my favorite RPG that I played this fall. I loved Valkyria 4, Dragon Quest 11, and Torna, but this game was something else. That game kind of caught me by surprise. I didn't even know it was coming out. It came out.
I haven't really thought about it till now.
Yeah, it came out. Everyone's been talking about it. I think it's only 6 hours, right? So I have no excuse not to play it.
It's supposed to be the first part of something. This is I think they gave this for free.
Yeah, this one it was a free download, and apparently it's supposed to be really good, but it's made by the same guy that made Undertale.
Yeah.
What's his name? Something Fox. I can't remember his name. Whatever. It's irrelevant. But the Undertale developer, he made this game. It's in the same style as Undertale. So if you all enjoyed Undertale and it's kind of quirky humor, apparently this is more of that type of experience. But it's supposed to be a new and unique adventure, and a lot of people are really really liking it. So I'll have to check it out. But I don't even know. Is it? Do you know if it's on the Switch?
I don't know. I'm sure it's on the PC.
Okay.
I know I can
Well,
say that much.
I'm sure somebody will let us know in the comments. But with that said, that wraps up this week's episode. If you are listening to the audio only version, please go to our YouTube page. It's called Phoenix Edge. Just type in Phoenix Edge RPG Podcast. Subscribe there. Our subscribers are going up and down, up and down. It's like a roller coaster. We want that to get a little higher so we can get some more viewers on here. So please do us that favor. And if you do have a phone that you like to listen to audio podcasts on, maybe while you're at work or at the gym or whatever, you can find this podcast online. Basically, any podcatcher, just search Phoenix Edge RPG Podcast and we should pop right up. But other than that, we'll see you all next week. Take it easy, guys.
Yeah.